I'm here to support farmers, which comes with the benefit of not having to pay inheritance tax. Now I do. But people like me will simply put it in a trust. And so long as I live for 7 years, that's fine. And as my daughter said, you will live for 7 years. You might be in a deep freeze at the end of it, but you will live for 7 years. But it's incredibly time-consuming to have to do that.
What happens when one of Britain's most outspoken TV stars walks away from fast cars to run a farm with almost no experience? The answer is more surprising than anyone expected. Jeremy Clarkson's diddly squat started as a 1,000-acre experiment that earned just £144 in its first year, yet became one of the most talked-about farms in the country. Behind the fame sit trade deals, livestock losses, financial struggles, bold business decisions, and a different way of selling food. So how did failure become success? And what can it teach about modern farming? Let's uncover the story. How Diddly Squat began. Jeremy Clarkson bought roughly 1,000 acres in Oxfordshire in 2008, a property then known as Curdle Hill Farm, for a reported £6 million. For over a decade, he barely touched it. A local farm manager ran the land on his behalf, growing the same rotation most Cotswold farms grow: wheat, barley, rapeseed, crops that require patience and machinery rather than veterinary knowledge. Clarkson himself has said as much publicly, describing farming during those years as something happening at a comfortable distance from his actual life. That changed in 2019, when his longtime farm manager retired, and Clarkson made the decision that would eventually put him on television, running the land himself. He renamed the property Diddly Squat, a wry acknowledgement of how little he expected to earn from it. The name turned out to be prophetic in the most literal way possible. His first year of hands-on farming produced a profit of £144, a figure so small it has become something of a running joke on the show that followed. What makes that number worth dwelling on is not the humiliation of it, but what it reveals about the gap between owning land and actually farming it. Clarkson had held this property for 11 years without understanding what made it profitable or unprofitable, a blind spot shared by plenty of absentee landowners who never have cameras following them into it. Why would a man with no agricultural background, no formal training, and access to virtually unlimited outside income choose to expose that ignorance publicly, rather than quietly hiring a professional and staying out of the fields himself? The honest answer seems to be that the show was never really the plan. The farming was the plan. The show happened because a camera crew found the process interesting enough to keep filming, and Clarkson, to his credit, never tried to edit his own incompetence out of the finished cut. There is a particular kind of exposure involved in that choice, worth naming directly. Most people who fail spectacularly at a new venture do so privately, absorbing the embarrassment quietly and adjusting course before anyone outside their immediate circle notices. Clarkson had spent decades as one of Britain's most recognizable broadcasters by the time he took over the farm, which meant every early mistake, every wrong decision about seed timing or livestock purchasing was going to be witnessed by millions rather than by a handful of neighbors. That visibility could easily have produced a defensive, image-conscious version of the show, one where Clarkson's genuine ignorance was smoothed over in the edit to protect his reputation as a competent, if eccentric, countryman. It did not happen that way, and the decision not to sanitize the process turned out to matter more than anyone involved likely anticipated at the time. That willingness to be filmed failing, repeatedly and specifically, is the thread that runs through everything that follows, including the decision that eventually led to cattle. It is also worth pausing on how unusual that decision was within Clarkson's own career. He had spent decades on television, playing a version of himself who was supremely, often comically overconfident, a persona built on certainty rather than doubt, whether the subject was a car, a road trip, or a political opinion delivered for effect. Farming required the opposite performance entirely, a man admitting on camera, repeatedly, that he genuinely did not know what he was doing, and that admissions like that were not a bit, they were simply true. Audiences who had spent years watching Clarkson project total confidence about subjects he actually understood were now watching him project genuine confusion about a subject he plainly did not. And that shift in register turned out to be far more compelling than anyone, including Clarkson himself, seems to have anticipated when the cameras first arrived. The trade deal that changed everything. The arable crops alone were never going to solve the farm's underlying problem, and Clarkson knew it well before he found a solution. British farm subsidies had been shrinking for years, squeezing margins that were thin, even in good seasons. And by the early 2020s, Clarkson was openly frustrated about it in interviews and in his newspaper column. Then, in December of 2021, the United Kingdom signed a free trade agreement with Australia, one that would gradually eliminate tariffs on Australian beef and lamb entering the British market. To farmers already operating on thin margins, the deal looked like an invitation for cheaper, mass-produced meat to undercut them in their own supermarkets. Clarkson, filming the second series of his show at the time, said exactly what he thought about it in front of the cameras. "Boris has done the deal with Australia," he told the people standing around him, "and no good can come of that. Cheap, rubbish beef coming in." It was blunt. It was underinformed in the narrow sense that he had not sampled the product he was dismissing, and it was also the spark for an actual business decision. If cheap imported beef was coming regardless of what British farmers thought about it, Clarkson reasoned, the only real defense was refusing to compete on the same terms entirely. Do not sell the same product cheaper. Sell something a supermarket shelf full of imported meat could never claim to offer. Grass-fed, locally reared, traceable to a single named field in Oxfordshire. That reasoning led directly to the choice of breed, and it is worth understanding why the choice mattered, rather than treating it as a detail. Continental breeds, the large, muscular cattle common across mainland Europe, grow lean meat quickly, but generally need supplementary grain feed to finish properly and develop the fat that gives beef its flavor. British native breeds, the beef shorthorn among them, finish on grass alone, because that is the diet those breeds were shaped by for centuries in exactly this climate. Independent farming sources confirm the same pattern Clarkson leaned on, that native breeds marble more naturally on nothing more exotic than English rain and English grass, producing the kind of fat-threaded beef that chefs increasingly pay a premium for. There is also a cultural undercurrent to that decision that is easy to miss if the focus stays purely on flavor chemistry. For much of the last several decades, the food industry marketed lean beef as the responsible, health-conscious choice, and continental breeds, being leaner by nature, fit that narrative comfortably. Consumer tastes have since shifted, with chefs and diners increasingly prizing marbling over leanness, the fine threads of fat that separate a genuinely flavorful steak from a merely adequate one. Native breeds happen to be sitting on the right side of that shift the entire time, quietly out of fashion for years, before suddenly becoming exactly what the market wanted again. Clarkson's grievance about a trade deal, in other words, turned out to double as a reasonably sound argument that British farmers had been making quietly, without cameras, for years, before he ever said a word about it. He did not invent the logic behind grass-fed native beef. He simply said the loud, provocative version of an argument the industry had been making politely and largely unheard for a very long time. There is an irony worth sitting with in how that argument reached its widest audience. Farming publications and trade bodies had been publishing the same case for native, grass-fed British beef for years, in language calibrated to be measured, evidence-based, and almost entirely invisible to anyone outside the industry itself. It took a famous broadcaster losing his temper about a trade deal, in a single unscripted sentence, delivered to nobody in particular, to put that same argument in front of several million people at once. whether that says something flattering about how effectively the farming sector communicates its own interests, or something slightly less flattering about what actually captures public attention, is a fair question the industry itself has had to sit with since. The heartbreak behind diddly squat. Livestock farming carries a risk that arable farming mostly does not, and diddly squat has not been spared from it. Bovine tuberculosis has been spreading through cattle herds across the West Country and the Cotswolds for years, and when it reaches a farm, the response is immediate and unforgiving. Infected animals are slaughtered under strict testing protocols. Movement restrictions follow, and years of careful breeding can be erased in a single visit from a government vet. Diddly squat's own herd was hit. Clarkson confirmed publicly that the very first calf ever born on the farm, an animal that had survived to become pregnant with twins of her own, tested positive for the disease and had to be destroyed. "This was the first calf ever born at diddly squat," he said at the time, "and this morning she was destroyed while pregnant with twins because she has TB. So sad." There is no version of that sentence that reads as marketing. It is a farmer describing a genuine loss in plain, unguarded language. And that plainness is precisely what separates diddly squat's public image from a curated corporate brand. Most businesses built around a celebrity name go to considerable lengths to keep failure off camera, understanding instinctively that viewers associate polish with competence. Clarkson's operation has done close to the opposite, showing disease outbreaks, weather losses, and blunt admissions of his own ignorance across multiple series. And the effect has been the reverse of what conventional branding wisdom would predict. Does watching a farm fail repeatedly, on camera, in specific and sometimes upsetting detail, make an audience trust the product that eventually reaches the shelf more or less? The evidence from diddly squat's growth suggests more, not less. And the reason is not complicated once stated plainly. A viewer who has watched a calf die of bovine tuberculosis is not buying beef from an anonymous brand built by a marketing department. They are buying beef from a specific field, a specific herd, and a specific run of documented bad luck. And that kind of texture cannot be manufactured by anyone who has not actually lived through it on camera for years. Bovine tuberculosis is not a rare inconvenience either, which is part of what makes the honesty notable rather than performative. It has been described as a quiet catastrophe running through British livestock farming for years, devastating herds across the West Country with a persistence that outlasts any single season's news cycle. Farmers dealing with it rarely get the chance to explain the emotional weight of a testing visit to a national audience. Clarkson, almost by accident of having cameras already rolling for unrelated reasons, ended up doing exactly that, turning a private agricultural crisis into one of the more quietly effective pieces of advocacy British farming has received in years, not because he set out to campaign on the issue, but because he simply refused to cut the footage when the news was bad. There is a broader pattern worth noticing in how selectively that honesty gets applied elsewhere in the entertainment industry, which makes Clarkson's choice stand out more than it might otherwise. Documentary-style content built around a business almost always exists to sell that business, and the easiest way to sell something is to show it succeeding. A cooking show rarely lingers on a dish that fails. A renovation program rarely dwells on a project running catastrophically over budget without at least implying a happy resolution is coming. Diddly squat has, at various points, offered neither reassurance, sitting with genuine loss and genuine uncertainty long enough that viewers had no choice but to absorb it as real, rather than as manufactured tension resolved by the next commercial break. Cutting out the middlemen. Most British beef farmers sell into a chain that takes a cut at every stage. A processor buying from the farmer, a distributor buying from the processor, a supermarket buying from the distributor, and the farmer who did 2 years of actual work ends up with the smallest share of whatever price finally reaches a shopper. Clarkson built his beef operation specifically to avoid handing his product into that chain at all. The first piece was the Diddley Squat Farm Shop, opened in 2020 by Clarkson and his partner Lisa Hogan, selling produce grown or reared on the farm directly to visitors willing to queue for it, often literally, given the length of the lines the shop has attracted since the show became popular. Even its labeling carries the same unpolished honesty as the rest of the operation. Its own burger sauce marketed on the shelf as made from beef that definitely did not die of boredom, a joke that also happens to double as the entire sales pitch. The second piece arrived considerably later and required a great deal more effort. In the summer of 2024, Clarkson purchased a former pub near Burford, a 15th century barn building known as the Windmill, for a reported price under £1 million, and spent a season rebuilding it into the Farmer's Dog, a pub and restaurant that opened its doors that August, after months of documented planning chaos. Its defining rule is stricter than most farm-to-table restaurants attempt: no foreign ingredients of any kind, meaning every plate served has to be traceable back to British soil. The ancillary operations built around the pub carry the same unpolished, self-deprecating branding as everything else Clarkson has built. An outdoor kitchen named the Farmer's Puppy and a dedicated butcher counter named Hops and Chops, both fitting comfortably alongside a burger sauce that jokes about its own beef supply. There is a third piece of the middleman cutting strategy that predates the pub and follows the same logic applied to a different product. Clarkson's farm grows the spring barley used to produce Hawkstone, his own lager brand, brewed and sold rather than handed to an outside brewery under license. The beer is poured at the pub, sold through the farm shop, and served from a tap room near the brewery itself, meaning barley grown in an Oxfordshire field can reach a customer's glass without a national drinks distributor ever touching it. On the same site as the pub sits a tent structure, hosting an outdoor kitchen, a dedicated butcher shop, and a small outpost of the original farm shop, meaning a single visit can move a customer from raw product to finished meal without a supermarket ever entering the transaction. Why does removing that many intermediaries matter to the underlying economics? Because every stage cut out of a supply chain is a margin that stays with the person who actually raised the animal, rather than the several businesses that traditionally exist purely to move it from field to plate. Consider what that chain looks like for a typical British beef farmer working outside an arrangement like Clarkson's. The animal is reared for roughly 2 years, absorbing feed costs, veterinary bills, and the constant risk of disease or bad weather the entire time, and only then does it enter a chain of processors and distributors, each taking a cut before the product ever reaches a supermarket shelf. The farmer who bore essentially all of the risk typically receives the smallest single share of the final retail price, an arrangement that has quietly squeezed small farms across the country for a generation. Clarkson's model does not eliminate that structure so much as build an entirely separate one alongside it, selling directly to a customer willing to pay a premium specifically because they know, in granular and sometimes uncomfortable detail, exactly which field and which herd their meal came from. That direct-to-consumer approach also creates a supply problem worth acknowledging honestly. A restaurant and a farm shop selling exclusively British, traceable beef need a steady volume of product, and Clarkson's own herd, subject to the same disease outbreaks and weather swings as any other, cannot always guarantee that volume alone. The operation has leaned on a small cooperative of nearby producers to help fill the gap, meaning the business now functions as more than a single farm's output. It has become, whether by design or necessity, a guaranteed buyer for several of Clarkson's neighbors as well, at a moment when a guaranteed buyer willing to pay a fair price without a supermarket contract department involved anywhere in the conversation is close to the rarest thing in British farming. That cooperative arrangement is worth pausing on because it complicates the simplest version of this story, the one where a famous man built a clever business purely for his own benefit. A neighboring farmer supplying cattle into that cooperative is not competing against Clarkson's herd for the same shelf space. They are supplying into demand his fame generated, but that his own land alone cannot fully satisfy, effectively renting access to a customer base built by someone else's television career. Whether that arrangement holds up if the show eventually ends and the built-in audience gradually fades is a fair question with no confident answer yet. Success beyond the farm. None of this has translated into steady, predictable profit, and Clarkson himself has never pretended otherwise. The wider farm's finances have swung dramatically from year to year in a way that would alarm any conventional investor. That legendary first-year profit of £144 gave way, over subsequent years, to a business now holding roughly £1.34 million in assets and employing 17 people, up from £44,000 in assets and 6 employees before the show began. But growth has not been a straight line. In one recent year, drought conditions cut wheat yields by roughly 30% and barley by roughly 40% against projections, and the farm posted an actual loss of just over £5,000 for the year, a result Clarkson himself described on camera as dispiriting, noting that a farm can do everything right and still lose money purely because of weather no amount of planning can control. The overall diddly-squat property, meanwhile, has reportedly grown from its original £6 million purchase price to something in the region of £12.5 million in estimated value today, a figure driven as much by the shop, the pub, and the brand built around them as by the underlying farmland itself. Some of that success has spilled outward. Caleb Cooper, the young farm manager who became Clarkson's on-screen foil, built his own production company around his newfound fame and has reportedly become a millionaire in his own right, entirely separate from anything Clarkson personally earns. Is any of this proof that Clarkson stumbled onto a genuinely sound business model, rather than simply getting fortunate with timing and a large built-in television audience? The honest answer sits somewhere in between. The trade deal that sparked his anger was real. The tariff pressure on British farmers was real, and the decision to compete on story and provenance rather than price was a coherent response to both. But none of that alone explains 6 figures in assets, a pub, and a supply chain built to avoid every middleman standing between a field and a plate. What explains that is years of a wealthy, famous man agreeing to be filmed failing, specifically and repeatedly, and somehow turning that honesty into the one thing no supermarket marketing budget has ever been able to buy. It is worth remembering, too, that Clarkson's personal finances and the farm's finances are not the same ledger, even if the public conversation often blurs the two together. The farming business genuinely lost money in at least one recent year, genuinely struggled through drought and disease, and genuinely required Clarkson to keep absorbing setbacks that would sink most smaller operations without a wealthy owner behind them. Separately, the television rights to the show that documented all of that reportedly earned him tens of millions of pounds from Amazon for the first 3 seasons alone, a sum that has nothing to do with whether the cattle themselves turned a profit in any given year. Conflating those two income streams, treating the farm as simply and straightforwardly profitable because the show about it was a hit, misses the actual mechanism at work. The show made the farm's failures valuable as content. The farm's failures, filmed honestly, made the beef valuable as a product. Those are 2 different transactions, running in parallel, and understanding the difference is the closest thing to an actual business lesson buried inside what otherwise looks like an eccentric celebrity's expensive countryside hobby. There is one more thread worth pulling before closing the ledger entirely, because it complicates any tidy story about Clarkson single-handedly rescuing his own farm through sheer stubbornness. None of this happened in isolation from the people around him. Caleb Cooper's own rise, from local farmhand to a recognizable name with his own production company, suggests the value being created here was never contained to a single celebrity owner. The neighboring producers, now supplying extra cattle to keep the shop and the pub stocked, are in effect benefiting from a demand Clarkson's fame generated but did not have to keep entirely for himself. A cynical reading of Diddley Squat treats it as one wealthy man's vanity project, subsidized by unrelated television income and largely irrelevant to ordinary farming economics. A more generous reading, and arguably a more accurate one given the actual numbers involved, treats it as a genuinely functioning business that happens to have been built by someone famous enough to document every mistake along the way. Mistakes that would have sunk a smaller, less visible operation without anyone outside the immediate family ever hearing about it. 144 pounds. That is where this all started, and it would have been easy to treat that number as a joke and quietly move on. Clarkson did the opposite. He kept the cameras rolling through the losses, the disease, the drought, and let an angry sentence about a trade deal turn into a farm shop, a pub, and a business that still swings unpredictably from year to year. Diddley Squat was never a straight line from failure to success. It was failure, filmed honestly, until honesty itself became the product. If this story pulled you in, leave a like, drop a comment with what you think Diddley Squat gets right about modern farming, and subscribe for the next chapter in this saga.